Hello, my friend. It's the 22nd Sunday in Ordinary Time. There's so many Sundays in Ordinary Time, and we have so many more left to go before we hit the next liturgical season, which is Advent. You're looking forward to Christmas? What do you want for Christmas? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll tell you why that is a great idea or a terrible idea for a Christmas gift. This week, we're talking about humility, and let me tell you something. People don't like to talk about humility. A couple of years ago, I wrote a book called Chasing Humility. You can get it on Amazon if you're interested. And it's cool when you write a book because when you tell people you're writing a book, everybody's excited. They have this very romantic idea of what writing a book is like. And everybody mostly hated English class and writing, except for a select group of us. And so when you say, oh, I am writing a book, people are just like wowed by that. They're like, wow, that's amazing. You're writing a book. The only time people have ever been more proud of me is when I told them I was going to be a doctor in school, which I was. And then I didn't turn out to be a doctor and people were less proud. But writing a book, they were proud of me. Again, they say, what's your book about? It's about humility. And then people were a little bit like, I don't know what to do with that, because we don't know what to do with that. As a culture, we don't know what to do with humility. Recently, I was giving a talk to a group of men, older gentlemen at this men's group at a parish, and I talked about humility and how it's necessary for us as leaders, as husbands, as fathers, as people in business, and of course, most importantly, as disciples. And one guy afterwards raised his hand and said, that's all well and good, but like it's wrong. Humility in business does not work. You've got to be ruthless. You've got to be cutthroat. You've got to do what you need to do for 40, 50, 60 hours a week to provide for your family. Then when you're not at work, you can be humble. So wrong. But so many of us think that. Does humility actually win? Does humility actually bring success? Is humility even reasonable? Because we have misperceptions about humility. Some of us think humility is self-deprecation, like we can't be proud of our accomplishments. We can't accept compliments. We can't think that we're good or that we're worthy. We have to put on sackcloth and ashes and walk around telling people, don't look at me, I'm terrible. Or when people compliment us, we have to say, oh no, please don't compliment me. Your compliments are like needles on my humble skin. Please stop. But that's not humility at all. That's actually just another form of pride. When we think that we're not good enough, what are we saying to God who created us? God, you're not good enough. Well, that's the height of pride. And then there's this other flip side of thinking humility is actually going to cost us. If we're humble people, we're going to get looked over. We're not going to be noticed. We're not going to be successful. We're challenged this week then in the gospel where Jesus is talking to a leading Pharisee. And that's an important note that you might miss as you're listening to the gospel this week. The context is critical here. Jesus is the home of a Pharisee. And I think we sometimes forget that Jesus interacted with Pharisees actually quite a bit. And he's there with a leading Pharisee, one of the top people. And he talks about a banquet and how when you go to a banquet, when you go to a feast, not to sit at one of the places of honor, because somebody more honorable than you might come. And then you're actually going to be shamed when you have to go to a lower position. Instead, take a lower position, and the host will then pull you up to your rightful place of honor, where you belong. This is a key to humility. And remember, the lesson is being given to a Pharisee who's probably very used to walking into a banquet and taking the place of honor, taking the spot that has been reserved for him. This is the highest place. And so Jesus is teaching a valuable lesson to us here as well, because sometimes we can think that we deserve a higher place of honor, or we can want it, but it's driven because we're afraid that we'll be overlooked. You know, if I sit at the end of the table, no one will notice me. If I stay back and I'm not putting myself out there in a prideful way, people are going to forget about me. There's this beautiful prayer called the Litany of Humility, which you can look up and pray through, but it's several prayers of deliverance actually from the effects of pride and how toxic they can be. But there's this section that I always really focus on that are these fears that come with humility, that if I'm humble, I'm going to be forgotten. If I'm humble, I'm not going to be loved. If I'm humble, I'm going to be despised. People are going to gossip about me. People are going to forget about me. I think that that's a place we have to dig into. Because who sees at the banquet? The master. And in this parable, the master is God. God sees you. This is the key to humility. Knowing who you are before God. And there's a twofold fruit of this. The first is this extreme gratitude, and a feeling of lowliness. Who am I to stand before the creator of the universe? Who am I to stand before God? We call this wonder and awe or fear of the Lord, that God is so powerful, so infinite, so unfathomable, and yet God has created me. Who am I to stand before that? And that's what pushes us to the bottom of the table to say, I can't be close to that. If God is at the head of the table, how can I put myself close to this incredible, powerful, just God when I'm a sinner? And here's the second fruit, that God goes to where we are and says, you are humble, but I'll exalt you. You see, you and me, we have tremendous worth because God's created us in God's image and likeness, and God sent his only son to redeem us, to save us. And so humility is also recognizing the incredible self-worth that I have, the incredible value I have in God's eyes, and being grateful for that. Recognizing that I didn't give myself that value, that I didn't give myself that inherent dignity, that nothing I did is going to earn or make me deserve the gift of salvation, and yet God has given it to me. Humility and accepting that breeds tremendous gratitude. And in that, this is going to be strange perhaps, but confidence. Not because of my gifts and talents and abilities, but confidence in God's love for me. And there's freedom in that. This is why humility is the foundation of prayer. Because we can't enter into prayer without this posture of heart. A posture of saying, God, you are God and I am not. I'm humbled before you. And I also know that because you have loved me, I have the audacity to pray to you and to be in relationship with you. Practicing humility requires just a couple of things. And here's what I'll challenge you with this week. The first is to pray that others would become holier than you would, that they would have a higher seat at the table, provided you become as holy as you should. This is the last line in the litany of humility. I think it's worth focusing on. Lord, give other people a higher seat at the table, just so long as I get to the place where I should. As far as holiness goes, help me to get to the place that I should. Pray that others would be given opportunities and gifts ahead of you, that they would get those seats at the table. Second is to be grateful for what you've been given. The first reading from Sirach talks about not seeking out wisdom or things that are too lofty for us. You see, sometimes we don't see the good things that are right in front of us, and we aspire to more, to bigger, to better, and we forget about the gifts God has given us now. Gratitude is a key aspect of humility, because when we recognize those gifts, we are humbled for what God has given us. And the last thing is this, to simply sit before God and to contemplate the massive reality of the God who made the universe and the fact that that God also made you. And to recognize that authentically living into your identity as a son, as a daughter of this incredible God we have the audacity to call Father, well, that's humbling in the best way possible. Humility isn't just necessary for success, although most of the literature surrounding it definitely points to that. It's the foundation of discipleship and a relationship with the Lord. If you can put yourself in that posture of humility, take the low seat at the table, God will most assuredly exalt you, reminding you of the dignity and worth that you have, and that you have a right to be at that table, but only by virtue of God's mercy and God's justice. That's the 22nd week in ordinary time. So go ahead, go out there, work hard, stay humble, all of those cliche things, and then come on back here next week where I will see you once more on Summit.